We went to quite a bit of trouble to get this engine out of our Lotus, and that's because we've got several jobs to do, and it's a lot easier when it's on the bench. Now, the most obvious was this manifold here. Because of the crack, it sounds like a tank, so we're going to change that. But also this cam belt here. Because of the history of the car, we're not really sure of when the cam belt was last changed, and because it could do an awful lot of damage if it was to break, we're going to change that as a matter of course.
How much damage? Well, if the belt snaps and the valves smash into the pistons, you're looking at thousands of pounds to fix it. First, I align the distributor, crank and drive shaft to top dead centre by lining up the helpful markings on the pulleys. Undo the tensioner and the old belt slides off easily to be replaced by a brand spanking new one for only £33. Mike will be happy.
The belt's back on, so what I'm doing now is just rotating the engine by hand. Oh, complete revolution. Okay, and I'm just going to try and line up again to top dead centre, and just to see, make sure all our marks still line up. Which they do, which means I've very successfully replaced our cam belt.
Now it's time to tackle the exhaust.
Got to take this manifold off, but the problem is you can see these rusty nuts on the rusty studs holding it onto the engine. So I'm going to get some heat on these guys, see if I can expand the nut and wind it off ever so gently, but wish me luck, it's going to be tricky. This is such a fiddly job, it's kind of ridiculous actually. I think if it had been on the car it would have taken probably half a day to do, but at least this way it's only taken maybe half an hour or so. The good news is the manifold is now off. A very heavy bit of scrap metal, and I'll now be replacing that with a nice new exhaust system.
The surface needs to be carefully cleaned or the new manifold gasket won't seal properly. It really does pay to be thorough.
I've now prepared the head ready for our new manifold, but I'm not going to be replacing it with another cast iron unit because although these are quite good for, very cheap in fact, for mass production, they're not so good for performance. And at the end of the day, we've got a performance vehicle. So what I'm going to be using is an aftermarket stainless steel tubular manifold. It's made up of lots of individual pipes that have got a nice uniform diameter, so the gas flows out much, much better, which means ultimately we get better performance, and for me, it's also easier to fit.
I'm not going to fully tighten up these nuts yet. First, I'm going to offer up the stainless steel collector and make sure it all fits together. The collector will be properly attached later when the engine is back in the car. And since the engine is out, I may as well give it a quick service, so I'm changing the spark plugs, replacing the oil filter and sticking in a new air filter.